Thank you, everyone. I'm Ed McCann, and welcome to Read 650's Vows here at City Winery in New York City. As many of you know, Read 650 takes its name from the maximum word count of the personal stories we present on our stage and in our regular podcast, 650 words, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. It's not easy to hold a reader or a listener's attention in that tight frame, just 2 double-spaced pages, but I think you'll agree the talented writers we'll meet today have done it. We are delighted to be back here at the Loft at City Winery, and I feel so fortunate to be able to spend time among people like you who value writers and writing. Thanks for joining us this afternoon to support good writing and the spoken word. The theme of today's event is Vows, and our editorial team has curated a rich selection of stories from the many submissions that we received with personal recollections about marriage, about sickness and health, about confession and diets, and more. So let's get to it. Our first featured writer this afternoon is Clancy McKenna. Born and raised in Broad Channel, Queens, Clancy has lived in New York City's West Village for 30 years. An English major undergrad at Queens College, she received her master's in creative writing from City College, and when not writing, she's an avid traveler and outdoors woman who loves camping and fly fishing. She's also a proud mother and hands-on grandma to 3 incredible young boys. Her recently published memoir, titled Wanderyar, is available from Amazon, and she opens today's show on Vows with her story, First Best Friends. Please give a very warm welcome to Clancy McKenna.
The firewood was damp. The campfire was smoking. "Will you marry me?" Mary Rose asked, knowing full well I had vowed to never marry again after the dreadful time I went through parting from my ex-husband. We were camped in a glade outside Quebec City. The 2 mountain bikes looked ridiculous standing upright on the rack on top of MR's tiny old Toyota. But they traveled well up there, and we loved the sport. The trail system was great, and we'd had some terrific rides. It was August 1991. We'd been dating for a year. Marriage, I thought. We couldn't legally marry. Civil unions wouldn't be on the horizon until the next century. But I loved her. So when I recovered from the shock, I said yes. My marriage to a man didn't work out, but maybe it would work with a woman. We drove into town and found a jeweler who crafted a matching set of square wedding rings. Square, but with slightly rounded corners. Silently, I vowed to love her until we'd fully rounded off those corners. Upon returning to our campsite, we started another smoky fire. Neither of us was a Quaker, but we held sort of a Quaker meeting. Speaking as the Spirit moved us, we said our own quiet and personal vows, promising love, respect, support, and care, spiced with joy and laughter. MR and I shared our lives together as married lovers for just 4 years. At that point, we agreed to take off those wedding rings. Despite our vows, the external pressures of society, careers, and families took great chunks out of our resolve. Our internalized homophobia and self-hate would require years of work in various types of therapy. I still wonder if we had made those vows to each other in front of our assembled family and friends, if we'd have had a better chance at survival. Intentions held in secret can so easily go up in smoke. Do you remember the schoolyard concept of FBF? I know BFF is the acronym du jour, but back when we were children, little girls sorted themselves out in terms of first best and second best friends. After MR and I parted ways, I partnered with 5 other women. But through it all, MR remained my first best friend. And my partners just had to cope with the fact that I had this powerful woman in my life. She was my champion. The vow we made in the 90s to love and respect each other remained in force for the rest of her life. We were no longer lovers, but in time that didn't matter. MR and I remained first best friends until pancreatic cancer took her off the planet at the end of 2012. Would my subsequent relationships have thrived if MR were out of the picture? I don't know. And maybe it's irrelevant. I needed her in my life, and she needed me, despite our subsequent pairings. I evolved into who I am today because of those campfire vows. By choice, I've been a solo traveler since Mary Rose died. It feels like the most authentic way to spend the rest of my life. I once had the love of my life. I was lucky, and I had her in my life for 22 years. After I retired from teaching, I spent a year alone on the road in an RV, getting to know myself, clearing away the smoke. Solo traveling is the way for me to go forward. I will never again vow to share my life with another. I'm blessed to have had a first best friend. Anyone else I might add to the mix at this point would always be second best.
It struck me in reading our performers' capsule bios and writing their introductions for today's show how often that they cite their dogs along with spouses and children. And it made me think that adopting a dog, or any pet for that matter, is really like taking another kind of vow to care and feed and love in sickness and health. And that train of thought sent me to my bookshelf for a little volume called Writers and Their Pets. And I paged through it. And while some writers are more strongly associated with cats, like Ernest Hemingway, or peacocks like Flannery O'Connor, here's a partial list of those dog-loving writers that I came up with. Elizabeth Browning, Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, Edith Wharton, Gertrude Stein, Virginia Woolf, Dorothy Parker, E.B. White, J.K. Rowling, Pablo Neruda, Kurt Vonnegut, Maurice Sendak, and of course, John Steinbeck. And Lynn Edelson is the first of several dog lovers that you will meet here today, and she divides her time between writing memoir and working on her collection of short stories. And this year, her piece, Just the Two of Us, was featured in the Her Story blog. She's a frequent contributor to Read 650, including as part of last year's Carnegie Hall's Voices of Hope Festival. She's the mother of 2 grown sons, one a writer and the other a musician, and neither of them, she says, she's fairly certain, will ever buy her a beach house. Still, thanks to her sons, she brought firsthand experience to her work as a cast member of the New York City Listen to Your Mother show, and she lives in the Hudson Valley with her husband and their 2 dogs, both of which, she says, shed far too much. Her contribution to today's show is called The Buffet. Please say hello to Lynn Edelson.
I've been scouring the kitchen for something else to eat. So far, I've helped myself to a bowl of 5-day-old instant ramen, 4 pieces of black licorice, 3 dark chocolates wrapped in Christmas foil from my overpriced West Village hair cutter, 2 stalks of celery, 1 roasted chicken wing, a pistachio cookie from the best bakery in Carroll Gardens, 2 handfuls of Trader Joe's peanut butter stuffed pretzels, a half bag of dried mangoes, a cup of pasta smothered in homemade pesto, and gum. The gum was so I wouldn't eat anything else. I spit that one out before hitting the celery. I'm eating like a mad woman because I need to edit an essay I wrote years ago. The deadline for submission to a literary magazine is 2 weeks away, but I know if I don't at least pretend to start now, I'll be lying in bed tonight filled with regret, haunted by the more than 200 pieces I've written over the past 10 years. Only a handful of those have been edited and submitted for publication, and they stare at me accusingly from the files of my computer. I need for someone who doesn't know me, who isn't seduced by my smile and good cheer, to read my words and sigh in recognition that I've spoken to their heart. It's not as though I don't do much. It's not as though I don't cook and walk 2 miles with my dogs. It's not as though I don't struggle how to figure out how to find an Amazon gift receipt on their convoluted site, or food shop, or wash the white cotton sheets and towels and hang them outside on the line on sunny days, or argue with my dog's health insurance company to get reimbursed for the emergency hospital visits in the middle of the night, or pay bills, or try to make sense of my own damn health insurance coverage, or garden, or provide parent training for the 2 families of special needs children on my caseload. It's not as though. But all those things are the things I do to not do this, to write. I got up early enough this morning, bypassed Wordle after being stumped at 2 attempts, ate an ancient toasted bagel from the depths of the freezer, because it also meant I could eat the cut-up salted radishes and cucumber on the plate. I finally got myself into the shower, knowing that was the line in the sand. And I promised myself I will write. Today I will write. I swear I will write. So after I hang up the towel, run the wide tooth comb through my knotted hair, brush my teeth, and put on deodorant, it's time to get dressed. Which brings me to the bottom line. To bra or not to bra? It's so tempting to let that one fly. I'm not going anywhere, and yet, if the bra remains in the drawer, I'm home. And if I put on those black cotton sweatpants with a gray t-shirt and my low-cut Uggs, I'm just an hour away from justifying making popcorn before noon and sitting on the long, comfortable couch while binging on a Netflix series. The ones that seduce me and bore me and take me into someone else's story instead of my own. So the bra goes on, and it feels as though I've just put on a shirt and tie, and I'm ready to head out the door after kissing the missus goodbye for the day. And I do. I bid her farewell, bid her black sweatpants a good day, pull on the jeans that are just wide enough at the waist to make room for all of the bad food I will eat, before I finally head towards my computer and begin.
Moira Colangelo is a former healthcare accounting executive who left her professional career in 2010 and added writing flash fiction and short stories to her retinue of interests. A first-generation American, she often writes about her life growing up in a large Irish family. And when not writing, she travels, hikes, cycles, cooks, reads, plays pickleball, and takes Irish step dancing lessons. Moira grew up in a family with a volunteer spirit, and she's worked extensively with the American Red Cross and organizations dealing with food insecurity and homelessness, either as a hands-on volunteer or board member or both. And she recently joined the board of a large healthcare institution in her community. She's passionate about assisting the underserved who are ill and alone, especially senior citizens, and 5 years ago became a certified hospice volunteer and recently earned a certificate as an end-of-life doula. And here she is with her personal story, Broken Vows. Please say hello to Moira Colangelo.
I made my first Holy Communion when I was 8, which meant I had to go with my father and older siblings on Saturdays to St. Mary's in Milford, Connecticut, to fulfill our confessional obligation. Heaven forbid we would take communion at High Mass on Sunday without a cleansed soul, whereupon I'd melt like the Wicked Witch of the West on the church altar for all the congregation to witness. Even at 8, confession never made sense to me. If God is all-knowing, why did I have to go to confession? So I made up lies just to get it over with, and then just dutifully accepted and performed whatever penance the priest told out to me. After all, if I hadn't sinned going into the confessional, the fibs I told while I was in there qualified me for the standard 5 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys the priest usually prescribed to save me from eternal damnation. One Saturday when I was 15, the priest slid back the panel, his head tilted slightly upwards. I peered at him through the holes in the carved wooden filigree that separated us. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," I started, then stopped. I gulped back the impulse to yell, "I can't do this anymore," well aware that my father and sisters were within earshot, as was God. Instead, I challenged him. "I don't believe in confession." "Why, my child?" he asked. I told him. I heard my mother tell my aunt that Father Gibson took off with a woman from our church. How do I know he won't tell people what he heard in confession? "My child," Father whispered, "he took a vow." The "my child" thing was getting on my nerves. So I said, "Yeah, but he broke his vow. How do I know you won't break yours?" Father and I went back and forth for another few minutes. He got angry, and I started crying. I left in tears and vowed never to go to confession again. And I didn't. I attended Mass and took communion with wild abandon. I intentionally or unintentionally shed some of the other vows the church branded into my young soul, including eating meat on Fridays during Lent and the no eating 1 hour before taking communion rule. I mean, just where is that scientific study outlining the downsides of digesting the communion wafer at the same time as a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich? I continued to take communion whenever the opportunity presented. Thank God, I was never struck by lightning. 45 years later, I am sitting in my living room discussing the details of my late husband's upcoming funeral with Father Maurizio. My husband and I had not been regular churchgoers. We went mostly for holidays, weddings, first communions, and confirmations. I nod politely as the priest lays out the rules regarding the strict choices of gospels and songs that are allowed during the Mass. His soft voice and manner lull me into compliance. When I sense Father is ready to take his leave and I am about to rise from my chair, he says, "I presume you are going to take communion at the funeral on Thursday." I plop back down. The religious training embedded in me triggers an automated response, and I answer obediently, "Yes, Father, I am." Father leans toward me and slowly raises his hand. Is he going to bless me? Is he going to pat me on the head? Either way, I brace myself for the conditioned sign of approval. Instead, Father Maurizio lays his hand on mine, looks me dead in the eyes, and says, "Good, but tell me, my child, when was your last confession? 1976, I avow. No more lying in the confessional.
In a bit of situational irony, despite what it says on your program, our next writer's name is not Maria Flores, it is Mariela. And that is my error, my typo, and it couldn't have been, it's just so ridiculous given the theme of her piece, which is called Say My Name and Say It Right. And if there was one typo in a dozen writers, this was not the one, but that's what happened. But if there are any copy editors in the audience who would like to back me up going forward, please see me after the show. Maria Flores is an English and creative writing major at Providence College, who incidentally traveled 3.5 hours on a bus to get here today and will be doing it in reverse after the show. She was raised by Central American immigrants in Rhode Island, and she will be the first in her family to graduate from college. Mariela embraces her many-faceted identity, first generation, low income, queer, Latinx, and writes to help break generational curses. A Phi Beta Kappa since her junior year, Mariela mentors other first-generation college students. She works for her school's newspaper. She serves as a resident assistant and also sings in an a cappella group. Mariela is planning to get an MFA in creative writing and makes her first trip to our stage this afternoon with Say My Name and Say It Right. Please welcome Mariela Flores.
My name is not a difficult name. It is as simple as Sophie or Anne in English, and yet I had been mispronouncing my own name for the convenience of the ears around me since I was in elementary school. At home, my name is like water, pouring smoothly through the air, Mariela. You say it the way you sing a song. My mother says it best. I like my name. I like that it isn't too common in the United States. And I like that I can't find my name on a keychain. It makes me feel special. My white peers often dismembered my name, calling me Mariela, and I never corrected them. It wasn't until my freshman year of college that I reclaimed the pronunciation of my own name, but not by my own accord. I do not share this story proudly. In fact, it pains me to admit why I've reclaimed Mariela, as if it were something that did not always belong to me. During my freshman year orientation, I met a boy named Sam. Sam was white. We spoke briefly about ourselves. I told Sam about my immigrant parents from Guatemala and El Salvador, and Sam told me about his life in Maine. At some point, Sam remembered we had not introduced ourselves, and so Sam eagerly asked me, "What's your name?" I looked at Sam and his reddish-brown hair and smiled because it was the polite thing to do. "My name is Mariela," I said, not even flinching at the self-colonization. "Is that how you pronounce your name?" Sam asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you speak Spanish, right?" It was an assumption. The right assumption, but an assumption nonetheless. "Yes, I speak Spanish." "So why don't you pronounce your name the way it's supposed to be pronounced?" Sam asked me with genuine interest. "Mariela is a fine name," Sam said. Sam said my name like a song. I looked at Sam for a long time, staring into his unfamiliar blue eyes. Who is this white boy to tell me how to pronounce my own name? I thought. I think Sam felt the tension that had begun to build around us. "Sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. I took AP Spanish," Sam said quickly. Sam took Spanish. Sam knew how to pronounce my name. Sam had reverse colonized the name I had been mispronouncing for most of my life for people like Sam. Sam in this moment changed my life forever. It was unfair of me to cast Sam as the villain in this interaction. I could see he meant well. "You know what, Sam?" I said, staring directly into his eyes. "You're right. I'm going to start pronouncing my name the way my mom does." Sam smiled, a big, toothy smile, and nodded. This was not my vow to Sam. This was my vow to the name I had abandoned. By casting my name aside, I had been removing myself from the history of my own name. Mariela is a culmination of moments. It is the burned skin of my parents' backs from a sun on the border of a dream. My name is Maria y Jose. It is the songs my mother sings to herself as she sweeps our home. It is the day my father decided to stop drinking himself to death. My name is the vow I make to myself to never again force Mariela into a person she will never be for the comfort of others. I haven't spoken to Sam since orientation. Still, I keep our conversation with me. I take it at every class when I share my name aloud, Mariela. I correct anyone who says it wrong, Mariela. Who attempts to strip me from all that I am. Mariela, that is my vow.
Ann Casapini is something of an expert when it comes to the mind-body connection, thanks in no small part to yoga and meditation, both of which she teaches. Ann's other creative passions can be a bit more, well, joyfully noisy. She loves to sing and dance salsa, and of course, writing spans all her interests. She's widely published in such places as Intima, a journal of narrative medicine, and anthologized in Fiction International, Crack the Spine, and Still Point Arts Quarterly, among others. She's also been a finalist and received an honorable mention for some of her flash fiction. She lives in Tuckahoe, New York, with her husband, son, and dog, Rocky, and she returns to the Read 650 stage today to read Disavowal. Please say hello to Ann Casapini.
Over the course of a month, I sewed more than 500 tiny white pearls and sequins, one by one, onto my satin gown and more onto my headpiece with a two-tiered veil. I had searched bridal shops in Manhattan and Long Island for my gown, but none cost less than $1,000. Then a friend told me about a place in Brooklyn that sold store samples. It was a huge showroom with racks and racks of tightly packed wedding dresses lining the walls. After an hour of pulling down ho-hum models, my arms and shoulders were aching. I was about to give up, but then I found the one. It reminded me of a period costume from the late 18th century. It had an empire silhouette, a fitted bodice ending just below the bust, giving a high-waisted appearance. It had Juliet sleeves, long and tight, with a puff at the top. The back was sheer lace, with a line of 20 satin-covered buttons down the center, and the pièce de résistance was the cathedral train. The elongated back portion of the gown, extending down onto the floor, created a majestic look. I bought it for a steal, $100. All it needed were pearls and sequins to catch the light. There were also vows to be written. David and I had decided to surprise each other on our wedding day. I knew his vows would be poetic and memorable. After all, he was a professional writer. Perhaps he would come up with something like the ending of Ulysses, when Molly Bloom finishes her passionate soliloquy with, "Yes, I said, yes, I will." Yes. So, each night, after my sewing sessions, I sat in the bathtub with pen and notebook planning. Write your vows. Wedding's almost here. I scribbled and crossed out. Scribbled and crossed out. To elevate my own 3-page outpouring of hopes, dreams, and commitment, I chose Shakespeare's sonnet number 116, which begins, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments." And there were no impediments as I walked down the aisle of the Church of Our Savior on East 38th and Park. Everything was perfect. As I passed each pew, I could hear our guests gasp with awe at the elegance of my sparkling gown and the dramatic trail of my ruffle-edged train gliding across the marble floor. The altar was surrounded by ornate bronze work and deep red gladiolas. I was to read my vows first. I had practiced it, 5 full minutes, and by the time I finished the sonnet, I could see my sister's eyes tear up with approval. Then, filled with anticipation to hear the vows my talented and romantic husband-to-be would offer me, I waited. David coughed again, then cleared his throat before speaking. As Yogi Berra once said, baseball is the most important thing in the world, but love is pretty good too. My cheeks flushed. He laughed, paused again. He'd never written his vows. He was winging it. I was so stunned. I couldn't hear anything until he ended with, "And you can take that to the bank." Done. 90 seconds. I wanted to bolt. But I was at the altar with 84 pairs of eyes staring at me and my 500 tiny white pearls and sequins. My feet would not move. Holding me to my promise was the weight of my gown's 20-foot train.
Anthony C. Murphy grew up in Lancashire, England, originally honing his voice in the spoken word scene in the UK. He now lives in the States, Yonkers to be precise, with his family, 2 dogs, and other wildlife. He also hangs out in downtown in Manhattan, where he is associate producer of the spoken word event Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner. A bit farther north, he's published work in the Westchester Review that was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. He has several poetry chapbooks and illustrated children's books to his credit, as well as a novel, Shiftless, published by Atmosphere Press, and a graphic poem, Liberty Takes a Break, which is available in choice bookstores. If you would prefer on-demand, you can get yourself a copy of Scopetry, his mixed-up book of poems and prose. Anthony is a regular contributor to Read 650, and he closes Act 1 of today's show with his story, Lancashire Pancakes. Please give a warm welcome back to Anthony Murphy.
On Shrove Tuesday, the family all vowed to deny ourselves our own something good until Good Friday. At least that was the plan. You know, just like Jesus had done in the desert. Wear a hair shirt, put Satan behind you, and then be beside yourself with a hallucinatory deprivation. We looked forward to the visions. But before that, we had to eat all the flour, eggs, butter, and sugar in the cupboard. We were duty-bound by religion. It was our God-given right to stock up our guts before dealing with the devil. In England back then, everyone usually ate the pancakes with lemon juice and lots of sugar. It became such a thing that the juice was sold in little plastic lemons by a company called Jif. We called it Pancake Day, but the TV guys called it Jif Lemon Day. Me and my school friends wanted to eat as many pancakes as possible. It was a thrice-a-year day for us to get full of pleasure, along with Christmas and Easter. We were passionate. How many pancakes are you going to eat? 5. I'm going to have 5. I'm going to have 7 at least. I'm going to eat so many, I throw up before Doctor Who comes on. None of us knew the meaning of Mardi Gras, but we knew the reason: to get fat. To us, it was just part of the year. Not really a commitment, but definitely a tradition. Then came the promises, the vows, what we'd give up for the fast. There were variations, but usually it went like this. My mum was responsible for shopping, cooking, cleaning, avoiding my dad's amorous advances, and she took care of 3 boys of different ages, a dog, a cat, a budgerigar, and also several fish, all called Fred. So she didn't give up anything. In fact, she got herself some more walnut whips and extra bottles of Blue Nun Riesling. Now that my dad had said to himself and his God that he would forswear the drink for 40 nights. He had the Catholic guilt thing drummed into him, and by God, he could stand the challenge. Although we all doubted that. Most years, he succeeded in staying out of the pub. He even hid behind the curtain on St. Patrick's Day. All his friends thought he was dead. If they passed him in the street, they'd seen a ghost. I'll see you at Easter, boys, was his sly, almost remorseful greeting. He did well, though. He even continued the practice after their divorce. He was proud of the effort and made promises of a brighter future. Though I often wonder if he died in February on purpose, dreading the ensuing dry Lent. As for the rest of us, the dog gave up chasing the cat. The cat gave up chasing both the dog and the budgie. The budgie gave up teasing the cat and stopped heckling the dog. And the fish gave up life. Often. My older brother gave up masturbating. At least that's what it said in his diary. And he did take his Madonna poster down. My younger brother, he gave up chocolate, or at least just one specific bar of chocolate, probably Bounty. And as for me, I gave up pancakes. Well, we only had them once a year anyway. I vowed one overindulgent year never to eat them ever again, was what I said. I make them sometimes, though, for my daughter. She likes it when I flip them, as I watched my mum and dad do, back in the pan and not on the ceiling. That's what we'd say. And we put sugar and real lemon on in the nearly Old English way. No syrup. And she loves them, but none past my lips.
Read 650 is a nonprofit literary organization with a mission to promote and create performance opportunities for writers. And in a publishing environment where it's often challenging to find or to hear new voices, we take that mission seriously, and we've worked hard to create this quality platform for writers and an entertaining and memorable experience for you, our friends and our guests. I am Read 650's Chief Everything Officer. And this passion project of mine has been my second full-time job since 2014 in organizing Read 650 as a 501c3 nonprofit. I built something I don't own and which cannot be owned, but rather is steered and shepherded by people who share my passion for good writing and the spoken word. And I made this choice because the fuel that drives the whole enterprise are the words and the work of these talented writers. And to profit from that felt wrong. And while I may not be a good businessman, I am so proud to feature their fine work. They are happy to present it. You're glad to be here. It all works out. And at a time in our history and in our culture when it can feel like we are just marinating in negativity, gathering like this to share stories and fellowship and wine, it feels like a real gift, and it is something that nourishes us all. Our volunteer editorial team places a strong emphasis on the craft of writing. We are storytellers, but this is really about craft, and it is about writing. And they read dozens and sometimes over 100 submissions on each topic before selecting the work that we present and record at events like this one, and many of which have a second life as the podcast that we launched in the spring of 2021 as part of Carnegie Hall's Spring Festival. And just to call out a couple of the folks who keep the wheels turning, Steve Lewis is our senior editor and literary ombudsman, and he has, at this point, he has read literally thousands of these submissions and given a thumbs up to the 497 we have presented and recorded to date. Sarah Caldwell, who records video and sound, is our volunteer chief technology officer, who also assists day and night with work related to the website and social media messaging and podcast uploads. And Jim Russick, who's here somewhere, he donates his time and his talent to help with marketing and to assemble and mix our bi-weekly half-hour podcast. And there are, where you came in, there are little business cards. And on your program, I really would encourage you to check out the podcast. It's basically a public radio half hour that we are working to get onto public radio. I'm very proud of what we're building. We're about 70 episodes in. But our ambition is to scale up and to attract more writers, more followers, more listeners. And in addition to our podcast, to establish a home on public radio where we do belong. And that's what we're working to do. Largely self-funded since our inception. And I've always believed that the return on the investment of all the time and effort and energy would come ultimately from sponsorship support and underwriting when we finally get there, but we're not there yet. And while a portion of the tickets you purchased for today's show do flow through to us from City Winery, our primary funding does come from you, our friends and our donors. Funds we hope will offset some of our basic operating costs and begin to help pay for an intern, a grant writer, and for some marketing assistance. So your donations will help take us to the next level. And I am speaking from my heart today to ask directly for your support. You do make it possible for us to continue this work. And your gift is an investment in our mission to promote and create performance opportunities for writers. And we're 2 weeks ahead of Giving Tuesday, which is going to flood your email boxes like it does ours. But to get ahead of the curve, I will let you know we have set a fundraising goal this year of $10,000. And I ask you to please consider a tax-deductible gift today in any amount to help us get there. On the back of your program, you will find a scannable code, which will take you right to the donate page on our website. And I will also at the reception, and please do stick around at the end of the show, there'll be charcuterie and wine and cheese and snacks in the lobby. I will have a little magic RFID card, which I can just touch to your phone, which will also take you to the website. So if you're inclined to do that, we'd be very, very grateful. But do also, please take the programs home with you today, share them with other writers. We're so interested in featuring other voices and having other folks learn about who we are and what we do, and to really attract more submissions and more support. So thank you all for listening and for being here this afternoon. We're going to pause here for a short break of about 15 minutes. And when you hear this bell, where is it? Here it is. Please do come back to your seat. And I've told folks before, I grew up with this bell. I'm the youngest of 6 children, and this is how my mother called us to dinner. And she'd ring it up the stairs, she'd ring it out in the backyard. So 15 minutes from now, you'll hear this. Come back for a great second half. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Read 650. Thanks. Welcome back to the second half of today's show, Vows. And before we bring up the next writer, I want to remind you that we are always working to feature new and diverse voices, and we are accepting submissions for upcoming shows. We are 2 days away from a deadline for Who, Me? And that is a show we're working on about ancestry and identity. And I know I am speaking to at least one writer in this audience who has a journal entry he or she could revisit and cut to 650 words before midnight on Tuesday. I know you can do it. Joan Didion once spoke about revisiting her old journals and discovering, quote, forgotten accounts that had accumulated interest. And I love that idea. She was a champion essayist who often combed back through her journals to tweak things that she then published in her collections. I also read that when she got stuck working on a manuscript, she would stack it up, she would wrap it in foil and put it in the freezer. And she would leave it there until she was ready to go to work on it again. I love that idea. Anyway, give some thought to what you have to say about your ancestry and discoveries and your sense of identity. And if you need an extra day or two, you can always email me, ed@read650.org, and we probably will cut you some slack, but we'd love to hear from you. We're also looking for stories about women in music, which is the theme of Carnegie Hall's Spring Festival, 2023 Spring Festival, where they will be focusing on the all the various aspects of women in music, both on stage and off. So if you have a story that relates to women in music, a memory of a piano teacher or a choral instructor, or maybe a favorite rock and roll experience, whatever, however it tangentially connects women in music, we will be the spoken word component of Carnegie Hall's citywide Spring Festival, and they will be promoting the event we're doing here in March across all of their platforms and in 40,000 printed mailers. We get a really big bump when we do a Carnegie Hall festival. So please give some thought to that. And you've got plenty of time. The deadline for that is January 1st. So please be thinking about that. And we are also always interested in essays for Between the Lines, which is a regular feature of our podcast. And that's a writer on any aspect of writing at all. And that's also something that you don't necessarily have to appear on our stage to present. During the pandemic, when we launched our podcast with Carnegie Hall, people were recording essays into their phones, with a blanket over their head in their closet, or in your car with the engine off. Almost sounds like a sound booth, but that's something that you can contribute in that way. But check it out. There's, again, inside your program, there's another scannable code. You can go to the submissions tab on the website. All the details are there. Between the Lines. And those pieces, they really are all over the map. We had a wonderful piece from Suzanne McConnell about her time at the Iowa Writers Workshop when her instructor was Kurt Vonnegut. And also a piece from Sally Schwartz, who's a comedy a humorist, a columnist for the Chicago Times, who wrote a piece about how she needs it to be absolutely quiet. In order to write, she needs quiet. She also can't write if the dishwasher hasn't been unloaded. She can't write if her hair's not tied back. It was just all these things about how she's learned to procrastinate. So anything at all that connects to writing and the writing life, we're really interested in those personal stories. So I encourage you to check that out. And you can always learn more on the website, read650.org. You can follow us on your social media of choice. But even better, we have discovered that when people opt in to get our twice-a-month newsletter, those are people that want to hear from us. And we have a really tremendously good open rate. And it feels like social media always feels like, dropping things out of a helicopter. You don't know where they're landing. But there's some clipboards maybe going around. You can add your name if you wish and your email address, or any page of our website. You can do that. We will never share your email address, and you can always unsubscribe with one click anytime. If that sounds good to you, please do join us. I just want to, in addition to Sarah and Steve and Jim, who I mentioned earlier, I want to thank the people who made this day possible, including my partner, Richard Kolath, our editors, David Masello, Lisa Donati-Meyer, Rhonda Zangwill. We're also grateful to City Winery CEO Michael Dorff, and to our production manager and audio engineer, Tom Unish, who is the man behind the curtain over there, man behind the soundboard. And thanks finally to City Winery's kitchen and wait staff working to keep us all fed and watered this afternoon, and let's give them a hand of their own. Thank you. And now back to our show. Annabel Monaghan's first adult novel, Nora Goes Off Script, was published to great acclaim this past summer by G.P. Putnam Sons, and she says that writing it was probably the most fun that she's ever had. Pre-Nora, she wrote fiction for young adults and a column for not-so-young adults that appeared in The Week, The Huffington Post, and The Rye Record, and those essays are collected in a book entitled, Does This Volvo Make My Butt Look Big? Annabel grew up in Los Angeles, and nearly every one of her relatives still lives in Southern California. As a child, Annabel was sure that she would marry Steve Martin, but she now lives in the suburbs of New York City with her husband, 3 sons, and a little dog who also sheds. There's that dog theme coming back. Annabel's next novel, same time next summer, will be released in June, and I am so proud to welcome her back to our stage to read Growing Up in a Marriage. Say hello to Annabel Monaghan.
When I was a newly engaged 25-year-old registering for wedding gifts, I chose 2 sets of champagne glasses, fancy ones, and the cheaper boxed ones for every day. Yes, you heard that right. In my mind, we definitely need everyday champagne glasses, like for Mondays. Marriage isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be when I stood up in front of all those people and promised to be married forever. Marriage was an idea attached to a big party. My boyfriend and all my friends would be there to see me in a really big dress. Turns out married and forever were concepts I hadn't grown into. I like to think of romantic relationships as progressing like life, starting in infancy and finally reaching maturity. When I met Tom, I attached to him the way a toddler might attach to a strategically placed candy bar in the supermarket checkout aisle. You couldn't have pried him out of my hands if you'd tried. I was afflicted by that mad infatuation that is probably the friendly cousin of the flu. Like a little kid with no sense of object permanence, I could barely stand it if he left the room. I decided to marry him after about a week, but kept that to myself as best I could. We were engaged in 9 months, married 9 months later, and I couldn't understand why the whole thing took so long. The newlywed period brought our relationship into adolescence. It's that time when you're pretty sure you know what life's gonna look like, mainly because you watched a lot of Dynasty as a kid. This period was characterized by a lot of getting jobs, getting engaged, getting presents, getting to go on a honeymoon. We fought about who forgot to fill up the ice tray and solved the problem by moving into an apartment with an ice maker. Why couldn't everyone be as good at being married as we were? Then life happens. There are beautiful things like children and long walks and a canon of inside jokes that don't get old. But also banks fail and people get sick. Maybe one of you forgets to renew the other's commuter parking permit. Whatever forces a relationship into adulthood is usually this other darker side of the marriage vows, the ones we mumbled through because they'd never apply to us. We'd be richer, not poorer. We had 2 sets of champagne glasses, after all. When life starts to happen, you learn about who your partner is. It's no longer Saturday night all the time. Adulthood can feel like a string of Mondays. Once you've moved through a patch of real life with someone, you learn a lot about the depth of their kindness, the strength of their integrity, and the staying power of their sense of humor. It's this moment where you stop sweating the stuff like the ice trays. At 25, it never occurred to me to wonder if my new boyfriend would someday take care of my disabled brother, or how he'd react when my mom died, or if he'd mind my sharing every thought I have about our family on the internet, should the internet turn out to be an actual thing. Now that I know, I've let go of the nonsensical way he manages the recycling. He's let go of the whimsical way I put away groceries. We don't worry about whether we have things in common. I don't golf, and he doesn't read. But we have the same address, the same kids, the same plumber who never shows up. Marriage, as it turns out, is more than just a really long, legally binding date. We are a going concern. We are each other's next of kin. Next March, we'll celebrate our 27th wedding anniversary, and it's on a Wednesday. So thank goodness for those everyday champagne glasses.
Charlotte Adamis began her writing career at the age of 8 in her diary with such insightful entries as, "Nana gave me Swiss chocolate bars," and "I am sent upstairs without dinner." By her mid-20s, she no longer went to bed hungry, thanks to what became a 12-year career as a journalist in the Mid-Hudson Valley, followed by 18 years as a school librarian. And after shepherding 2 sons safely to adulthood, she now writes her own true stories. Charlotte's work has appeared in Her Story, Hippocampus, and TMI Project blog, and when she is not writing or tromping through the woods, Charlotte volunteers as a social justice advocate. She lives with her husband in Kingston, New York, where they now parent a loving but disobedient miniature wire-haired dachshund. Charlotte returns to our stage today to share her Vows story, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. Please welcome Charlotte Adamis.
My mother and I were very good at starting diets. The Scarsdale diet, the eat nothing but grapefruit diet, the get on the scale and make yourself miserable diet, especially after a night of binging, which we were especially good at. But we were far less successful at keeping diets. At 16, I wasn't fat, not by humane standards. Yet growing up in Scarsdale, we liked our women borderline anorexic. Not actually anorexic. Girls like that were sent to hospitals. I was merely sent to Weight Watchers. I barely remember that dingy meeting room on Central Avenue, but I distinctly recall the pizza and brew next door, because that's where my best friend Alice and I would spend the $15 our parents had given us to get skinny on ice cream sundaes. It would take a 10-day hospital stay the following summer, a suspected case of spinal meningitis, to finally drop the pounds my parents had paid for. I had become a thin girl, at least on the outside. My Polish grandmother, my father's mother, approved. "You used to be fat," she said. "Now you look good." This from a woman who was missing 2 fingers. A few weeks later, when I walked into a local bar, a place where I had gotten sloshed plenty of times, I noticed there were guys checking me out. Guys had never checked me out. I should have been happy, right? Instead, I got drunk. And the more I drank, the angrier I got. And then I started ranting. "You don't even know me." My friend Denise, my drinking buddy, had to pull me out. I broke down sobbing in the parking lot. How could losing a few pounds make me suddenly visible to the opposite sex? But I knew that it did. For the next 30 years, I was in and out of Weight Watchers meetings from Manhattan to Boston to Kingston, New York. I made a lifetime member. I was a star. I found a first husband, a second husband. Yet success never lasted more than a year or 2. Anything could wreck my perfect record. A rough day at work, a family holiday, any family holiday. The next thing I knew, I'd be sitting alone in the dark, gulping down half a chocolate layer cake. Homemade, yes, but still. After, I would promise the god of diets, that sadist, that I'd be good. Still, it could take months before I was ready to crawl back to a meeting and face the scale. Growing up, my Aunt Judith, my great Aunt Judith, had a magnet on her fridge. A moment on the lips is a lifetime on the hips. That was gospel to generations of women in my family. Our moral worth could be assessed by what we ate. Anything that tasted good was bad, and anything that tasted bad, like the cabbage and tomato soup my mother made after we overindulged, was good. Of course, we were hardly unique. How many others solved their weight problem like my mother's mother had, with her doctor's blessing and a prescription for speed? She committed suicide at 57. But, like everyone said, what a figure. Finally, in my mid-50s, after I had gained and lost enough weight to have formed another human, I said, enough already. I quit starting. I quit failing. I quit dieting. It was then that I made a promise to myself. No more would I even think about living like my Polish grandmother, a woman so afraid of gaining weight, she never took an ounce of pleasure in eating. Not that I rushed out and joined the body positivity movement. It's been a slow process for me of embracing my inner fat girl. And some days, I do embrace her, with or without an ice cream sundae.
Anne Levin is a writer, she's a book reviewer, and she describes herself as a recovering journalist whose work has been featured in newspapers, magazines, and websites around the world. During a long career at the Associated Press, she coordinated coverage of elections in the 50 states and every imaginable kind of natural or human disaster. One of her favorite stories ever was the airlift of bighorn sheep from a state park near San Diego. And although she now lives on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and grew up in Western Pennsylvania, went to a Quaker boarding school outside Philadelphia, graduated from all-women Smith College, and studied writing, barbecue, and beer at the University of Texas. All of those experiences continue to inform her work. She's a frequent contributor to Read 650 and returns to our stage today to read What's Love Got to Do With It? Please welcome Anne Levin.
When I look back at my calendar for the day I got married, I see a single entry, a 10:30 meeting with the couple who sold us their apartment. Up until then, neither Stan nor I had ever been a homeowner, even though we were in our 40s. Naturally, I recorded every step of the process. It's not the kind of thing you ever want to forget. As for our wedding, I didn't even write it down, because the decision of whether we wanted to spend our lives together had already been made more than 10 years earlier, back in 1989, when we were working for a newspaper in San Diego. Stan got a job offer in New York, and I had to decide whether to quit my job without a job and go with him. I went with him, but I never intended to exchange wedding vows. As a child of the 60s who came of age reading The Feminine Mystique and Our Bodies, Ourselves, there was no way I was going to let a patriarchal society tell me what to do. As far as I was concerned, marriage was an institution that involved men handing over their daughters to other men for the purpose of procreation and the orderly transfer of property. To paraphrase Tina Turner, love had very little to do with it. I wanted a career. I didn't want kids. I wasn't religious. And I'd been on my own long enough to have all the cups and saucers I needed. Stan did too. So what changed my mind? Well, I was going to die. Earlier that year, I was diagnosed with hepatitis C, a potentially fatal liver disease, and there was only a 50-50 chance the treatment would work. I was sure it wouldn't and wanted Stan to inherit whatever money I had. He was sure it would, and he couldn't have cared less about the money. But since I was the one who was dying, I got to choose. The day of the wedding, July 21st, 2000, we had turkey burgers at the Barking Dog Luncheonette, which was right down the street from the apartment we wanted to buy. Then the 6 of us, my mother and brother who had flown in from Pittsburgh, and Stan's sister and brother-in-law who had come down from Boston, took the number 6 train to Brooklyn Bridge City Hall. At that time, civil marriages were held in the beautiful old municipal building at 1 Center Street. After we went through a metal detector in the lobby, Stan bought me a hideous bouquet of flowers and baby's breath wrapped in cellophane. Then we took the elevator to the city clerk's office to join a throng of strangers for that quintessential New York activity, waiting our turn. Sunlight poured through the enormous wood frame windows, lighting up every scuff mark on the worn vinyl floor. The room was so crowded, we couldn't find 6 seats together. Entire families showed up for the couples dressed in saris, prayer caps, tuxedos, and jeans. One woman, who looked 9 months pregnant, wore a white satin wedding gown. When our names were called, we slipped behind a tacky curtain where a city clerk stood behind a podium. "Do you?" she began in a thick Nuyorican accent, and the whole thing was over in less time than it takes to order a coffee and a bagel with a schmear. Afterward, we had lemonade in the plaza, then took the train back uptown, where that evening we argued over which dishes to get at our favorite Vietnamese restaurant. All these years later, my views about marriage haven't changed. I still think it's a patriarchal institution that exists primarily for procreation and the orderly transfer of property. But I'm glad I did it. In fact, it worked out even better than I thought. I married Stan, we're still together, and I didn't die.
Wendy Goldman is a Chicago native who spent her formative years hopping the L to soak up the magic at Second City. Later in Los Angeles, she joined the famed comedy troupe The Groundling, and there she co-created an original musical, Casual Sex, mostly so she could sing in front of a big group. Wendy went on to write and produce loads of TV shows for companies such as ABC, HBO, Warner Brothers, and 20th Century Fox, including the MTV series Faking It. Recently, Wendy's been teaching writing workshops here in New York, where she continues to improvise as she goes along. And while she hasn't yet had another opportunity to sing in public yet, you just never know what that future might bring. And we are lucky that in our immediate future, Wendy is going to join us right now with her story, The Actual Brentwood. Please say hello to Wendy Goldman.
It's been over a month since I told my therapist I was leaving, but I can't yet because she needs me too much. The problem is her 15-year-old daughter, who used to get good grades, and they used to be so close. Now they're barely speaking. I can tell from Marcia's cold that won't go away, this daughter stuff is really killing her. I slide the Kleenex box across the coffee table in her direction. I never even knew she had a daughter before this, or anything personal. Well, once there was a seasonal arrangement on her desk, but I couldn't read the card from where I sit. Before the session, I promised myself that today would for sure be the day. I rehearsed my speech, and I wore the boots that give me confidence on dates. I planned to get a brownie at the coffee shop downstairs as a reward for job well done. Progress is why I decided to leave Marcia. I pictured her happy about it, or at least okay. Dream analysis isn't her strength. She said so herself. And my dreams mean a lot. Instead, she insisted we needed more sessions to wrap things up, for my sake. My stomach, which she taught me to listen to, was screaming no. Once I forgot to sign the check. But every Tuesday, I'm back in the elevator, pressing 3. Her daughter will be better off in boarding school. Although it's not going to be easy on anyone. I can imagine is what I say, and I nod along. When she sighs and it's quiet, I jump in. So, I actually think that I'm ready for this to be our last session together. Marcia looks confused. Then, like I'd slapped her. This is what you do. You cut people off. Me? No, me? But her eyes are already darting toward the clock I can't see on the bookshelf. That's our time for today. We'll pick this up again next week. After that, I passed 2 business guys on San Vicente shaking their heads. Good thing it's not my car. Hell yeah. It hits me. I bet I'm getting a ticket. I start running. A young girl shrieks, "Do you believe it?" She points to a gigantic tree branch blocking the sidewalk. It's crushing a VW Bug at the curb. You can only see the license plate. 6RBT522. I swear, this is a perfectly clear California day. No wind, no storm, no earthquake. Now I really run. My car! If this were a dream, my legs would turn to cement. Or I'd be in a public restroom with an overflowing toilet. Not my fault, but I clean up the mess. Or I'm trapped in an alley with a man with claws for hands. But this isn't a dream. It's the actual Brentwood, not a nightmare Brentwood, and I'm truly wide awake. I wait an hour for AAA. Police cordon off the street. Everybody's got to honk their horns and stare. Person after person walks by and moans, "Oh, thank God it's not me." I wear big sunglasses, but not big enough to hide my entire face and body. Luckily, the cab of the tow truck smells like French fries, which is a comfort. I'm convinced that the tree falling on my car is a sign from the universe. I vow to never, ever park on San Vicente again. In fact, I will avoid the entire area of Marcia's office, a 5-block radius. 6. I'm already dialing the number. She sounds lonely on her voicemail, but I can't worry about that now. I'm canceling our session for next Tuesday. Thank you for your help, but I'm not coming ever again. Anymore. Really. For sure. Bye. I mean it. I gaze at my phone. Like any minute it'll turn to gold or dance around in my hand. Did I just say that? Progress. Sometimes all it takes is a little nudge.
Angelique Feebles-Bell considers herself a cranky Pollyanna. In a previous life, she was a sports writer, feature writer, and nominated for a National Investigative News Emmy for her work at NBC News. Over the years, she scratched her writing itch in various communication and volunteer gigs, as well as taking classes from brilliant teachers at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. Angelique is currently the Assistant Communications Director at an independent boys' school where she gets to be loud and talkative, all in the name of her job. She and her husband live in Connecticut with their 3 dogs, but also near their 4 sons in New York City. And Angelique joins us today to share her personal story, Broken Vows. Please welcome Angelique Bell.
I'm kneeling in a small, dark closet, speaking to an old man on the other side of a screen. I haven't been inside this box in decades. I didn't think these priests need to hear anything too titillating for a while. Bless me, Father, I say, for I have sinned. I don't remember when I had my last confession. I get angry at my kids, and I'm sorry for everything else I might have done to offend God. Really? That's all you got? The priest says. You get angry at your children? That's not a sin. What I want to say is, listen, Padre, you're lucky to be getting even that from me. Considering what's been going on in the church lately, is there anything you want to tell me? Instead, I wait him out. I've spent years interviewing people as a journalist, and I've learned to stay silent and let them fill the void. What about gossiping? You gossip with the other mothers? Is he freaking kidding me? Wait, forget the freaking part, I'm still in church. Father, do you ask the men if they gossip too? I can almost feel the weight of the heavy side coming from the other side of the screen. I only ask because it's something I've heard other women your age say, so I'm trying to help you out here. Ooh, I hope he can feel the deep sigh emanating from my side of the closet. Yeah, sure. Okay, I do, and I'm sorry for that too. 5 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, and quit gossiping. Ugh, that smug bastard's onto something. My whole life, I always wanted to know what was going on, who was going where, and later in my teens, who was doing who. It's probably why I became a journalist in the first place. I ask anyone about the most intimate part of their lives, and there's a pretty good chance they're going to answer. And let's be honest, information is a form of currency, something I learned as a young churchgoer. When I was a 6th grader at St. Mary's, there was a rumor going around about a girl, Moira Fitzgerald. Think junior high Rizzo. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies. Moira was one of those girls who developed early. Well, I wouldn't see a training bra for another sad 3 years. Word in the halls was that Moira went to 3rd base with an 8th grader. One day, I was called to the office, and Moira was assigned to walk me. Clacking down the stairs in our Mary Janes, Moira asked, Angelique, did you tell people I made out with Drew? I guess big boobs come with big confidence. I started to sweat, and I wiped my hands on my tartan jumper. I had visions of Moira shoving me down the last few gray marble steps. But when I looked up, she just seemed hurt. Nope, wasn't me. but it was me. Some kids on the playground had been talking about Moira. I wasn't nearly cool enough to even know what first base meant. Nevertheless, I chimed in. I heard it too, instantly fortifying the rumor, because if even Angelique had heard it, it must be true. And that was a payoff I'd never had before. I ran down the last flight of stairs ahead of her and burst through the office, my face hot with shame. It was then I vowed never to share anyone's business ever again. But, as my priest can confirm, I'm not perfect. So, I confess, I occasionally lend my ear to someone who needs to get a salacious story off their chest. Sometimes people desperately need to unburden themselves from the pressure of holding in a killer piece of news. In those situations, I know I'm doing them a favor. Wait, that's a virtue, not a sin. What else you got, Padre? 8 years ago, Edward McCann, an award-winning writer and producer, was at an uninspired public reading and thought, why not create a new kind of literary event that gathers a select group of talented writers to present 5-minute or 650-word takes on a single topic. The idea became Read 650, which creates performance opportunities for writers and celebrates the spoken word through live and digital performances. Since that fateful day, Ed and a team of dedicated volunteers have worked to present hundreds of stories at dozens of carefully curated, high-quality events in association with partners like Vassar College, the National Arts Club, and the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. Today, Read 650 engages audiences with regular live shows here at City Winery's flagship location in New York, and with the regular half-hour podcast he launched in the spring of 2021 in association with Carnegie Hall. Ed shares his Hudson Valley home with his partner Richard and their rescue mutt Willie, and his own writing has appeared in many journals and magazines. He returns to the stage to close today's Vows event with his personal story, Two Grooms. Please say hello to Ed McCann.
I don't want a cake with 2 grooms on top, Richard said. And we're not dressing up like Tom Wolfe, I said. Let's just get married and have a party sometime this summer, Richard said. And we won't even call it a wedding, I replied. Mimi, the marriage clerk at Kingston City Hall, beamed, congratulating us with hugs and tiny bags of M&Ms. With our license valid for 60 days, we consulted our schedules and added the event as if it were any other appointment, like a trip to, say, the Department of Motor Vehicles to renew an auto registration. Richard and I had shared a business and a home for over 15 years. We had both been married before, to women, and we had no desire to stand on a receiving line, to dance a first dance, to make or to listen to a speech. We have supportive friends, family, even clients, and we're as committed to one another as 2 people can possibly be. Over the years, we have already shared better and worse, supporting each other through loss, grief, and illness, including a summer of radiation therapy. Richard, joking, asked me to marry him long before, a moment I'll never forget, but we'd never expected legal marriage to become a possibility in our lifetimes. Years earlier, our attorney had drafted some documents to enable us to protect each other's interests, wills and powers of attorney and some other papers, just in case. We weren't sure we needed to get married, but something stirred within me that early summer day in 2011 when New York made gay marriage legal. When I saw images of the jubilant gay couples who rushed to be married at midnight, double brides and double grooms, mature couples like Richard and me, partners who had been together for years, thrilled, finally, to have their commitment codified by the state. Despite those just-in-case papers that I carried from state to state in my briefcase, I knew that in an emergency, it would only take one unenlightened nurse to place a wall between Richard and me. and chilling stories of gay couples in crisis loomed large. A car accident, the sudden reappearance of an estranged family member assuming the mantle of next of kin, the long-term companion shut out, refused entry, refused access, refused information. That simply didn't happen to married people. In a straight crisis, simply saying, "That's my wife in there," would suffice. A few simple words that grant one person admission to his or her rightful place beside another, without presenting documents or even a wedding ring. Richard and I simply wanted that same protection, and once we made the decision, we reached for our calendars. "It should be a Tuesday or a Thursday," Richard said, "so it doesn't conflict with our gym schedule." "Right," I said, surveying the weeks ahead, "and afterwards we'll have lunch or dinner or something someplace." We asked 2 close friends to be our witnesses and booked a lunch table at the Mohunk Mountain House, a historic Victorian mountaintop hotel in New Paltz near where we live. Focused then on deadlines, it wasn't until our wedding day was upon us that I realized how very different this was from the other events filling our schedule. Actually, it was like nothing at all like a trip to the DMV or a chiropractor appointment. Richard and I were finally actually going to marry, and it felt like a very big deal. At Ulster County Family Court, we stood in Judge Tony's office between a desk and a sofa, and I had butterflies. "I'm not going to use any magic words to marry you," Tony said. "You just have to say out loud in front of me that you wish to marry each other. If you've prepared something, you can say anything else you like." I took Richard's hands, looked him square in the eye, and the 2 of us made promises. I could see forever from where I stood, and I already knew that forever would not be long enough. Will all the writers come on up? Let's have the writers up here, everybody. This is a great house. We built Read 650 around live performances like this one, and I am so proud to be here with this group of fine writers and proud of what a very small group of committed unpaid volunteers has accomplished and continues to build with me. And as I explained earlier, there are lots of moving parts to this organization, and we have room and we have need for more worker bees. And if you have any interest in supporting what we do, in sharing your talent, your time, please do get in touch with me at read650.org. Talk to anyone else on our board, but it's just the other shoulders to the wheel that will move this all forward, especially in areas of marketing and finance, which is where we do need help. Please reach out if you'd like to discuss. I hope that you will follow the podcast. We are really proud of that, and I think it sounds as good as anything you'll hear on public radio. Please do stay in touch by joining our email list. Take your program with you, share it with other writers, and please consider Read 650 in your year-end charitable giving. In Swahili, there is a well-loved phrase, tuko pamoja, which translates to "we are together." And it's what my friends and family often say when we raise a glass in a toast. And although there are many issues that divide our world, all of us in this room are united in our love of stories and the spoken word. And so I say tuko pamoja to you. I'd love to hear it back. Tuko pamoja. There you go. And again, from my heart, I'm grateful for all your support. We just can't do what we do without you. And this round of applause from us up here is for all of you. And please don't rush off where there is still wine to drink, people to meet. There's cheese that can't eat itself out there. And if you enjoyed yourself today, please do tell your friends about us. And now, one last thing. We're going to do a bow. Hold on. Everybody. Ready? In 3, 2, 1. Let's go down. And as our dear friend Malachi McCourt often says, live every day as if it were your last, and one day you'll be right. Thank you.